Hinchcliffe. We're going to do our very best. Popping these two, can you, if you're good here? Seriously. Welcome to Derby. When was the last time you were in Derby?
When I was 1.
Wow.
My father worked for Rolls-Royce, and he was an aeronautical engineer, and he worked on the Merlin engines during the war, and in the test department. And he unfortunately had a heart problem, and he had to retire.
There we go, have a great life.
So let's start again. And he had to retire, so we then left. And my mother managed a shop in Derby called Hunt's, I think. But I don't think it's here anymore. So it is a very long time, in fact 80 years ago.
Wow. Have you been here before, Philip?
Yes, I was at this convention about 5 or 6 years ago, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a place.
So I survived it. I've come back.
That's fantastic. Who'd have thought? Here we are in 2024, and 50 years ago, you guys were working on Doctor Who, and here you are talking about it again. Would your younger selves have believed that possible?
No, not at all. Wouldn't even crossed our minds.
Yeah.
Well, mine anyway.
So when did you realise that there was perhaps a greater interest in your work than perhaps other shows that you'd worked on?
Well, I suppose I was, once the fans sort of got themselves organised, both in the UK, and then it began to get stuff from America, realising, I suppose that was just a sort of groundswell, but I didn't really, think it was going to be more than that. For me, probably, is when it came back in the modern version, there seemed to be a sort of renewed interest in the profile of the show, and I think our era, was always a favourite with the fans, but there was a whole new sort of fan base that emerged for the new show, and so I think that's when it's got a bigger profile in the world, really.
Yeah. What about yourself, Roger?
I still can't really believe it, actually. It seems very odd. I mean, I've said it before, but we were trying to build sets that didn't wobble. And then all this, and I've worked on been very lucky, I've worked on some big pictures, and yet the thing that most people want to talk about is Doctor Who, which is extraordinary, really. So it always comes as a shock, and I think, the biggest shock I ever had was Phillip and I were in the States a few years ago, and they said, well, we're going to do a Q&A, come onto this, we'll introduce you, walk onto the stage out of the wings, and I did, and 2,000 people stood up and cheered, and I thought, this is really, really weird.
That's amazing. I suppose it always gives you a sort of a rock star kind of feel when you've got that, perhaps something you wouldn't have dreamed of when you were starting work at the BBC.
No, they thought I was somebody else.
Roger Daltrey.
Maybe.
So, let's wind back. Do you remember the first time that the pair of you met?
Yeah, well, yes.
Roughly when, but can't remember them.
But Philip was taking over. It was my first time. Barry Letts introduced us, I think.
Yeah, I think it was.
And the idea was then, as you probably know, we were doing the Sontaran experiment, which was already set up. They'd already found the locations for that, and the archive space was then to follow. And while the Sontaran experiment was being filmed, we were building the sets and designing the sets for the archive space. So I was having to whiz up and down from Dartmoor to the television centre. It was a bit of a baptism of fire, and especially especially for Phillip, because the weather when we were filming on Dartmoor was cataclysmic. I mean, you can't really see if you watch it on screen, but the rain was horizontal, and I have a permanent memory of all these figures in oilskins trudging across Dartmoor, carrying lamps and God knows what, and occasionally dropping into the swamps. And I mean, it was appalling. You can't see it. Everybody, God, you were so lucky to go to Dartmoor. What a luck! And we'd get back at night absolutely hanging in rags and soaking wet. But
well, we had to send the cameras back to the hotel in the lunchtime to dry them out on the radiators. These were lightweight video cameras, not film cameras. Yeah, that's exactly what was happening. So it was memorable baptism for both of us, really.
And I mean, the other thing, which again a lot of you may know, but I finished what I was doing there that day, had to get back to the television centre, and as I said, the ground was sopping wet. Tom slipped, fell, broke his collarbone on a rock, and an ambulance came, and I think Phillip said to me, if you're going back to the studio, can you just put it off for a few hours and go with him to Newton Abbot Hospital and make sure he's okay, because we have to keep on filming. So I said to the ambulance drivers, what do I do? And they said, just tuck in behind us, ignore all the red lights. That was great, actually. And Tom, he'd only just started. His concern was, obviously, my God, if this is really bad injury, will I carry on? Am I going to lose the dream job and so we sat there for, as you do in hospital, for about 3 hours together, and I got to know him really well, which was lovely. So it meant that all the way through our period, we had a group of people who got on well and appreciated each other, and it made the whole thing very much more pleasurable.
Magnificent. So I'd imagine that during that first season, there's obviously you're very conscious of the budget, the fact that you're reusing sets from Ark in Space and then bringing them back in Revenge of the Cybermen, which I suppose let you push the budget in other ways as well.
Well, you had a budget, and everyone, each department was given their budget. What I would do with my Bob Holmes, really, when we mapped out the stories, we kind of robbed Peter to pay Paul. If a story had more film content on it, we thought it was worth it, but we'd allocate more, filming to that, or outside shooting to that story, and contain some of the other ones, just in this studio, or very limited, outside filming and stuff. So that was the way you sort of balanced it. But yeah, the budget was what the budget was, and it's, people like Roger and costume and visual effects, they really worked well within the constraints, and that's the way it was. But it wasn't highly budgeted, but people were very resourceful, and that's how we got over things.
And for yourself, Roger?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. The thing is, if you haven't got very much money, all you're left with is your imagination. So you have to then start to think outside, well, how can I do this for next to nothing? We were basically given a weekly series budget, like Z-Cars or Softly Softly or what have you. And that's fine if you're doing something which is, where you can go out and rent a table or rent a ship. But for sci-fi, you can't really do that. You've got to build an awful lot. So you are thrown back on your imagination. And we did a little video some while ago about the plans of evil. And Phillip found my original budget, which, if you think, that was building that whole jungle at E Studios, which it wasn't huge, but it took up, I should say, a good half the stage, and 4 episodes, and all the interiors, and the entire budget was £3,200 and 500 man-hours. That included all the props, everything. So you have to just beg, borrow, and steal, really.
Compared with what they must get now, we did it on a shoestring, really.
The thing is,
and also, the big thing was that we didn't have any real post-production. We were talking about this the other night. That it was shot, it was recorded, but it was shot as if it was live. You know, it was rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, and then you sort of shot it. And what you took out of the studios that you shot in a limited time that you were given, that was your program. We did music and audio dubs afterwards, but there was you could assemble the show a bit, but not edit it like a movie, shot by shot. So you had to get it right, really. It was almost like live television. You had to get it right when you were doing it. That's what made it so difficult. And so, real explosions had to happen in real time, and other effects had to happen in real time, as you were recording.
Yeah, and the effects were all done in camera. So, there was no post and being able to lay effects on afterwards.
That's right, you couldn't put anything in afterwards, yeah. And so now, modern one, they've got CGI, and although, I know that they've got a budget as well, but they've got the luxury to fix things a bit more. We couldn't fix anything, and there's some famous failures in some of my stories, I think, and it was nobody's blame to blame really. It was just it was a step too far sort of thing. You couldn't pull it off every time really. I think the program has always had a sort of forgiving, a sort of relationship with the audience, where the audience have been quite forgiving in a way, and that they realised somehow it was a sort of curious production in a way.
You mentioned there things creeping in, that's perhaps shooting in there. What did you think of the hand correction from Pyramids of Mars, with the hand holding down the cushion being removed for the new version that was shown earlier this year?
Well, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any of those Blu-rays. I couldn't really get them working, so I've never seen them. But the problem is it was made to be seen once, the program, and maybe possibly twice. We did Christmas compilations, and you don't have to worry about these things. People don't see it, but once the VHSs came out, people started buying them and scrolling through the program. They could see all sorts of things. So we made it to work once, and the viewer can, it'll be fine. So they weren't faux pas or failures. You didn't need to be so scrupulous.
Actually, we couldn't be more scrupulous, really. That was the technology as it existed at the time. And now people are comparing it to what they see on the screen now. And of course, with all the CGI, anything is possible. The only thing I would say is that in that period, people, because it was done in real time, people actually were almost more prepared to accept it. I think audiences are much savvier than we give them credit for. They know when it's all CGI. And that's why a film like Fury Road, they used very little CGI, it may not have been the best story in the world, but actually people loved it because it was credible.
You're right up there. Sorry, my inner dad coming out. I suppose when you look at Doctor Who these days, they have their tone meetings where they've got design teams and everybody coming together to work so collaboratively. And the thing that always struck me about your era, Philip, was the fact that you've got regular contributors like Roger, James Atchison in costume, things like that, all coming together and having a regular bunch, so there was like a consistent visual feel throughout your time. Is that something that you were quite keen to do?
Well, I think we both sort of contributed to that. I think that I had I was born with a very strong visual sort of sense, you know, I sort of see pictures rather than words. I wanted the show to pay more attention to the worlds that we were creating, so I, you know, gave that a little bit more importance. And then Roger can tell you, he tried to make it even more collaborative, but it was difficult with the BBC accepting it.
Yeah, Jim and Atchison and I discussed the fact that here we are trying to create a new world, and yet he's at one end of the building, this is the television centre, and I was way the other end. And would it make much more sense if we shared an office? And eventually we got the heads of department to agree that we could work in the same office. And unfortunately, about a month in, whether it was my fault or not, I don't know, but he had a nervous breakdown. And the experiment failed. But we always try to work very closely together, because that's what you're trying to do. I also have this belief that whatever you're doing, sci-fi, it has to make sense to the audience. If you've got some piece of weird machinery or whatever, it's still got to make sense. And that's, I think, why, for instance, the Planet Evil worked well, because what I said to Phillip is, you know, let's build this jungle. Let's try and touch the fears that people have about an environment they know, but then turn it on its ear, which is what we do. And that, I think, the proof of the pudding was actually it really worked.
Yeah, well, we were ambitious, and we pulled it off most of the time, I think.
Definitely did. In fact, people still cite the Planet of Evil jungle as being one of the best jungle sets on TV. So I think you must have done something right there. So what, with this core team together, it seemed to be, from the fact that the way that you guys chat, it seemed to be a happy professional period in your working lives. Would that be fair to say?
Well, it was brilliant for me. It was my first job as a producer, and it was the first time I'd worked with the BBC. So there was, I mean, it's a huge organisation, and it was very exciting to be there. It's almost like I had, you know, lots of toys to play with, but I had to learn the job, you know, almost learn on the job as well. But the main thing, if you get the basics right, which is get the scripts right, get the right directors, and then you know, the heads of department, you know, like Roger. If you can kind of get the basics right, then it is enjoyable. I mean, the thing, I mean, anyone who makes television programs knows that every day you have problems. I mean, that's it every day. It's not, you don't coast. You have deadlines, you have stress, you have, I suppose, some people don't do as good a job you want, and you know, all those bits. You've got to sort of be able to handle with those. But yeah, it was very exhilarating for me, because I inherited this popular show, you know, Saturday, Sunday, and suddenly, you know, wow, I was the man, you know, helming it. So it was, yeah, looking back, it was a very enjoyable time now.
Was it enjoyable for you as well, Roger?
It was. I mean, I'm on a hobby horse here, because people, at that period, people at the BBC worked there because they were proud to work for it and you were allowed to experiment, and because it wasn't funded by advertising, you could afford to take risks. They weren't chasing audiences. We loved it when we got a big reaction, but it wasn't the be-all and end-all. Is this going to work for the advertisers? So they were prepared to take risks. Yes, there was a lot wrong. Yeah, people took advantage of the system and that needed sorting. Unfortunately, when John Burke was sent in to try and sort this out, he saw what was wrong, but he didn't really get to grips with what was right about the place. And he threw the baby out with the bathwater and basically destroyed the whole ethos of what BBC. I'm not knocking the BBC because as a broadcasting news journalism place, it's second to none. But there was an awful lot there which was terrific, and people, I could have left and gone and worked and earned probably twice as much working for ITV, but we were proud to work for the BBC, and that enthusiasm showed through. And you could go and say, I had this crazy idea, why don't we try, I'd say to Phillip, why don't we try so-and-so? Well, okay, let's give it a go. And it didn't always work, but when it did, it was magical. And if you think back, if you look now, look at the comedy programs. How many of the comedy programs are from the 70s and 80s? Because they were witty and they were original thinking, and now they tend to be repetitive. And I think they've lost something very special. But that's me bleating on.
Philip, you mentioned there you inherited a popular show. You also inherited Tom Baker, who'd been cast by Barry Letts. And of course, in the 21st century, the new showrunners get to cast their own doctors when they come in and go with them. So how was it for you, picking up with Tom, somebody, a leading man who you hadn't chosen yourself, and say a wonderful leading lady, Liz, as well?
Was it for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was very fortunate, looking back, because I wasn't landed with having to find the new Doctor. And you couldn't cast the lead in a show like that without reference to the head of the department, like head of series and serials. I mean, if Bill Cotton wanted a new comedy show, it couldn't just be the producer or even the head of comedy to have the say. It would go one notch up, because big celebrities. It was a big decision, and it had been taken before I joined. So I dodged a bullet there, really. It would have been hard for me to come up with someone who was, like Tom. I didn't really know him. It wasn't a problem, because really, basically, he just grew, he was on it really right from the start. We just tidied up a few little things with his mannerisms, and he very quickly kind of was giving the performance we wanted. So it was terrific. Yeah, it was a non-problem for me. It was great.
Yeah. If Tom had left, who would you have cast? I was thinking about this on the way down the road. But given that you never had to worry about a recast, but was there anybody at the time who you may have cast if Tom had gone and you'd carried on?
Had I thought about sacking Tom?
Hypothetical if Tom had decided.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I never had to worry about that. It's hard to. I don't know. No, there was nobody. I was so. I thought he was so good. For my era and the stories we built, incorporating his playing of the Doctor, worked really well, and the chemistry with Liz Sladen and then Louise, it just went swimmingly along. I did it for 3 seasons. When you go much longer than that, I think that's when you get the problems. You flog the balls a bit, and so I didn't. you know, I had the best of Tom, I think, probably. And we were two new boys at the BBC, new boys on this show, and we both were enthusiastic, and so it was a really good sort of pairing for both of us. You know, we've been launched, you know. But I don't know, it's very difficult to, I mean, I don't think that all the castings of the Doctor in the new form, in the modern era, have been successful. I'm not going to invidiously talk or name culprits or whatever. I can certainly maybe go back to look at the Doctors that followed my era. Very mixed bunch, I think. I think a lot of people got it wrong because they didn't know what they were trying to do with the show, or what they were trying to do with the show would not have been my kind of way of treating it. So I wouldn't have cast any of those Doctors who came after me.
So Roger, you were given quite a few challenges with the stories that you were given. I'd imagine that potentially when you're seeing something like the Talons of Wen Cheyenne, you're thinking, oh, here we go, Victorian London, how are we going to do that? That must have been a bit of a head scratcher to start with.
Well, bear in mind we were quite used to doing period drama at the BBC, so in a way it was a period drama. There were some interesting things. I mean, people have heard me talk about this before, but there was no internet then, so you know, we needed all these shots in the sewers. How are we going to do that? You know, where do I find the information? Yeah, I found a few sort of grainy black and white photographs of what the sewers were like, and a few sketchy drawings, but nothing else. So I said to the production secretary, could you possibly get in touch with the sewage treatment people and see if they've got any photographs? And she came back, they said, why didn't you go and have a look? What do you think of health and safety now? So I was taken down to the, put in a boiler suit, gloves and a hat, and taken to somewhere just around the corner from Olympia, and down through a hole in the road, and 2 hours in the sewers. And I have to say that, again, we had very little money, but in fact, those sewers are pretty accurate. That's very much what it is like. You do get those junctions and odd rooms off, and it was an extraordinary experience. And the question before you ask it is, once your head is below ground, the smell goes, which was extraordinary. You know, you think, oh, really? I don't want to go down there. And they open the lid, and oh, God. And then you go down the ladder, and it's literally the minute your head is below the level of the pavement, the smell disappears. Very strange.
You must be glad you missed out on that location trip, Philip.
It was really interesting. Just going back to something Phillip says, and you may have heard this story, and I always thought it was apocryphal, but I bumped into David Troughton a few years ago, Patrick Troughton's son, and I said, this story about your father and Tom Baker, is it true? And he said, yes, it is. I can't believe this. And apparently, Patrick Troughton walked into the canteen at the BBC rehearsal rooms and saw Tom Baker standing ahead of him in the queue, and Tom had just been cast as the Doctor. And he went up to him, he slapped him on the shoulder, and he said, I can't tell you, you are just going to have the best time. It's the best part in the world. Fantastic, congratulations. And Jonathan Miller turned around and said, I have no idea what you're talking about.
What is it like when you've got a leading man like Tom, once he's settled in, and obviously he has his own creative ideas, perhaps, which more came out after you'd left, and Graham had to sort of work with Tom on those, but I'd imagine that there's a simmering creative energy amongst the team to do the best that they could, and Tom, of course, being the figurehead of that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you're getting at, but the scripts were sacrosanct, whatever the word is, sacrosanct, and helpful things, you know, as they're in rehearsal, change things a bit. But, you know, if it was anything major, it had to come back up to us. The inventiveness and all the rest of it with the director, you know, in rehearsals was, yeah, he was fizzing with ideas, but we sort of diplomatically, you know, didn't use many of them of the art line changes. Having said that, we had a problem with an ending of Liz's goodbye, and we'd swapped the scripts around, and it hadn't really been a very good version of how they said goodbye. And Tom and Liz said, "Give it to us, we'll work something out," and they did. And given them the due, they did a really lovely sort of goodbye sequence at the end of that story. But overall, no, you can't have the actors, you know, getting too powerful and upsetting everything. You know, you've got to be in charge. I think the problem maybe, I'm only guessing, but I think that by the time I left, Tom was the remaining person, he'd been on the show the most. And then if you're a new sort of producer coming in, not with much experience, you know, he's kind of almost more senior in terms of the show, and maybe the balance, the power, you know, was wrong. And I think, I've never asked him, but I think that possibly Tom felt that he kind of was the guardian of the values of the show, and he knew more about it than anybody else, really. And so maybe that might have felt like he was throwing his weight around. I mean, I don't know any of the details at all, but that's my surmise, that there might have been a balance of power, you know, as to who's really the author of the show, you know, what's it like and all the rest of it.
Yeah. When did you become aware of just how popular the show had become, you know, particularly getting, you know, Tom's iconic look, and, you know, appearing in cartoons and newspapers and things like that? And that must have been quite a bit of a, oh, okay, this is big.
But you know, I tell my grandchildren, trying to impress them, and say, do you realise that for 6 months of the year, at tea time, this show my shows had an average audience of 10 million. And so we went up to 12 or 13 when we really hit the highest. And I mean, that's a massive number compared with people who watch, you know, the TV audience today. So you didn't. I mean, it was popular. It was you know, it wasn't popular with everybody, but it was a family-oriented show, and it was successful, and it was popular. And you know, stuff. You know, we had a new assistant that would be in the, you know, Louise was all over the papers, and anything major Tom got involved with, or Daleks or anything like that, was always in the papers. So it always was, you know. It wasn't as if it suddenly became more popular. I think there's a new sort of audience for the new series because they've got personality guests in it, you know, better known and all the rest of it. And also it's a huge sort of PR kind of machine behind the program now. I mean, when we were doing it, Tom and I went to the head of BBC Enterprises to try and persuade him to sort of respond to what we were hearing from America, because it was out there, but it wasn't really marketed very well over there. And there was a sort of groundswell of fandom in America, and we said, look, actually, I think BBC's missing a trick here. You know, we want to look into that. Anyway, Peter Dimmock took us to his club, the Garrick, and we dined very well, and we made our case, Tom and I together, but nothing ever happened. But we were right. We were ahead of the curve. We knew that it was going to be much bigger, this show. So it was despite, rather than, you know, in the end, the BBC got it right, yeah.
If I can add to that, Philip, I think the other thing that was that then it was a family show. It was something that you sat down and watched with the kids. And if talking to audiences now, it's not. It's much more niche. It's not something that children share with their parents. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I think the younger children, you know, do watch it with their parents. Yeah. I think they always have.
Yeah. Of course, Philip, you've recently revisited your entire era, and I think we should maybe ask a man who's been working with you on this, Mr. Gary Russell, to come up and join us.
It was wind.
Right. Hopefully not a metaphor. So Gary, could you maybe tell us about the book that you have been working on, Philip?
Well, we decided initially what we didn't want to do. So Philip didn't want to do a biography, and I didn't want to do something that was just retreading old ground and sort of reviewing episodes and doing that. So what we decided between us was that we would break the book down into a chapter for every single story. But what we would do is we would get people to write an essay on a particular theme or a particular subject relating to that story, but also going above and beyond it. So we would look at, thank you, Philip. We'd look at the era, sort of in a more, I won't say cultural point of view, because that sounds a bit poncy, but it's looking at it in a slightly new way. It's just taking a sideways step at everything, and then interspersed between every single one of these chapters is an essay by Philip, where he sort of also picks up on the themes that these essayists have written, and I wouldn't say it's a right of reply, but it's interesting that Philip's point of view on some of these and other people, and the essayist's point of view are not always the same, and I quite like that. I think we ended up with a very nice, very honest book, looking at what is, frankly, the biggest and most well-remembered era of the show, which is all down to him. And so it's a celebration of Philip's era of the show. Would you say that?
Yeah.
That sums it up?
I think so, yeah. I think the thing I like about the idea was when we were struggling and chucked out the old sort of approach, was because I wasn't writing it, but I've been, you know, being interviewed and done loads, you know, revealed a lot of material. But we, as Gary said, you know, suddenly this idea came up of a compendium of articles, different people's views. But the thing that really appeals to me is that these are people today looking back, you know, on my era working on the show. But it's looking back, you know, it's modern, it's today, people's opinions today, looking back. So it's kind of retrospective in a way, but it's fresh, you know. The programs still exist, and this book is responding in a different way. It's not celebrating, oh, you know, this was marvelous, blah blah blah, and all the rest of it. It's just people giving their individual view of the show, and they're very knowledgeable about it, and they say some really interesting things.
I mean, one of the things that I was very keen to do was not, thank you, one of the things I was keen to do is not go back to people who have been writing about Doctor Who for the last 850 million years. There are a handful in there because, you know, you have to keep some of these people employed. But I've gone for a lot of people who have come to Doctor Who through the new series. So you're seeing for the first time, I think, a lot of people in their sort of late teens, early 20s, and their exploration of Philip's show and their exploration of Doctor Who and the heritage that it has. And so you're seeing a very 20th century TV program through the eyes of people who are 21st century viewers, but also have a genuine knowledge and appreciation and understanding of television. It's not like they're just sort of sitting there going, oh, it's not very good because the sets wobble. There's none of that. Because the sets don't wobble, because Roger made sure of that. So it's a nice sort of broad church of different people coming in and talking about Doctor Who and talking about what that era means to them today. So, you know, you've got one of my favourite ones is a fantastic writer called Emma Coe, and she runs the East Asian Actors Association in London, which is all about getting Asian actors on television. So obviously I asked her to write about Talents Wang Chang and representation of Asian actors in television, not just in talent, but in Doctor Who and indeed television throughout the whole sort of 20th century. And so she brings a really interesting bit of insight to that no one else could have provided. I've got Alex Kingdom, who's a cerebral palsy guy, and he's written about, I gave him Genesis to do, but he's written about the representation of disabled people throughout the history of television, particularly looking at Doctor Who, and finding it surprisingly positive compared to most shows. And so there's lots of stuff like that, and it's new, it's just a nice new twist on looking back at old Doctor Who. That's fine.
It would be more interesting.
That's never going to happen, Philip. The most fun thing I say from my point of view is once I've got all these essays together and the book was all sort of laid out and everything, and we've got this material. Philip had originally been talking to Graham in Canada, who was originally going to do this book that was almost turning into a biography, and that's why it didn't happen. But I had access to all that material. So I was able to then go through that with Philip and make these sub-chapters in between. And I went down to Philip's rather lovely house, and we sat for an afternoon and just sort of tidied it all up and tied together everything. And I learned more about Philip's career and life in that sort of afternoon than I'd ever expected to do.
That's a new book coming back. See you in the course.
Yes. Oh dear. No, it's been great because working collaboratively with Philip, as a writer, I'm not used to working collaboratively. I don't work with people very often. So to do something collaboratively with someone has been absolutely brilliant. And when it's someone, and I'm not just saying that because he's sitting here, but when it's someone as nice and as open, as fresh as Philip is, it makes the whole book sing. You have this fantastic juxtaposition of takes on the show from fans and takes on the show from the man they're talking about. It's brilliant.
Gary, maybe better tell us who the book's published by and where people get it.
Yeah, well, it's on sale downstairs on the ground floor. It's produced by Cutaway Comics. We created a new publishing arm called Roundel Books. But yes, Gareth Kavanagh, who runs Cutaway Comics, came to us with the idea. And so he's downstairs, and we've got the book on sale. It's officially launched this weekend in hardback and paperback. So yeah, it's down there, and this is the first of, we hope, many. We've just started work on the Graham Williams years book, so that'll be coming up next. And I think there's the potential to do a number of these, looking at different producers and different eras of the show. And that includes, ultimately, the 21st century versions as well. It's not just going to be classic Doctor Who, we're going to dip in and out across all 60 years, 61 years, 62 years as it's going soon.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's us for time up. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to Philip, to Roger, and to Gary.
Panel, a fantastic Whoovervillian appreciation for our three guests. If you liked this, then in 3 weeks' time there is some more. Philip will be at a Leeds event for Who 77.